And this is probably why I tell the people that are like, oh, his money, our money, my money types, like to kind of fuck off, because like that sort of belief system, that sort of mindset doesn't really help at this point. All right. If you are going to be in this sort of ideal that I am talking about, or if you're going to be a part of this group that I'm talking about, then both sides need to contribute into the pool such that the both of you guys are contributing probably about an equal amount. And
the royal penis is clean, Your Highness.
Welcome to the Breaktime Podcast, where I talk about love, sex, and relationships from a guy's perspective, as well as a bunch of other guy shit. The man on the mic is a man whose sickness for the thickness prevents him from skinny dipping. He is also a man who might include running his mouth as part of his cardio routine. It is none other than your tall, dark, and mildly handsome man, Sir Denver B. I am here to talk about two things that seem very critical for men today, and that is money and dick. Which seems a little bit odd that I'm calling dick critical, because that almost sounds gay, but, it is critical because we need to use dick nowadays, because, apparently if you don't have dick... Anyways. Guys, it's probably not what you think it is. If you actually listen to the episode, there's a pretty good chance you'll realize that everything that I'm going to talk about regarding these two topics is particularly different from what you might actually think that it is. And it's nowhere near as nasty as you might actually think it is. But then again, that would actually require you to listen to the entire episode. Of which, first of all, if you have listened thus far, thank you so much for listening to this podcast. I hope you listen all the way till the end of this episode. And if you like it, if you don't like it, if you'd like to give feedback, or if you'd like to suggest a topic that I should discuss on this podcast, then the place to hit me up on IG, it is at the Breaktime_podcast. On Facebook, it is at the Breaktime Podcast. On X, it is at BagakaTheD. And on Bluesky, it's a bit long. It's at the breaktimepod.bsky.social. If you want to hit me up through there as well, because I am on Bluesky, or at least the podcast is on Bluesky. And, I'd be more than happy to receive your DMs, receive some of your suggestions and some of that feedback. But all in all, like I said earlier, a massive thank you to you for listening to this podcast, and I hope you are actually entertained to listen to it all the way till the end. And now, all that aside, I actually probably should be getting to the main topic. But before I can do any of that, I first want to talk about a particularly interesting individual who said some very interesting things about dick. Now, the interesting individual is none other than George Peter Kaluma, who was saying very recently that circumcision is male genital mutilation. Now, obviously, considering that he said that, coming from a country where a vast majority of people are either Christian or Muslim and or are from a tribe that promotes and is very open to the idea of circumcision, you could probably guess what the comment section said about that, both on Twitter and even on IG, where I pulled this story from. Now, I have a particularly unpopular opinion, having read whatever it is that he wrote on Twitter, of which he said, and I quote, "Stop circumcision. Circumcision is male genital mutilation. Donkeys don't circumcise. All animals don't circumcise except a few human beings who have been lied to that they are the grandchildren of Abraham, a man who lived in the desert without water." End quote. And, people were very, very quick to be like, you know what, this guy is just saying that shit because he's not circumcised, blah, blah, blah. Or, it's the word of God, so you have to listen to it. It's not even that much questioning that you need to do after that. And, okay, while I can get why most people would probably have a one-track mindset on this entire thing, I, having read this, formulated a particularly unpopular opinion, which I am going to discuss on this podcast. And I know for a fact that I may face backlash, not necessarily now, but maybe sometime in the future, and some people are going to be against whatever the hell it is that I say. But before you can do any of that, just let me cook when I say that besides matching up with society's beliefs that you should probably be circumcised, depending on your religion or culture that you come from, there isn't really much of a need for circumcision in today's day and age. Now, I know someone's about to lose their shit and be like, oh my goodness, you're only saying this because No, I am actually circumcised. I was circumcised very young, and I am still saying that now. And I have particularly interesting reasons behind it. Now, before I can get into any of that, first off, I think dude was a little bit wrong because he was talking about how the only reason why guys are circumcising or are still being circumcised is because they were lied to that they are the grandchildren of Abraham. And honestly, that's not entirely true. It's probably like maybe 50, 40, maybe 30 or even 20% true, because for the most part, a lot of people in this part of the world, by this part I mean Kenya, or you could even say Africa, aren't really circumcising because of the religion. It's mainly more so because of the cultural background that they come from. Now, don't get me wrong, like the whole religion part of it is also particularly true, because as far as the missionaries coming and like asking us to like join Christianity or Islam or whatever it is that we ended up joining, one of the things that actually lined up for a lot of cultures, or should I say tribes, that interacted with the missionaries was things like marriage and things like circumcision. Now, both of those are in the Bible and they are accepted. So if it lines up with that, then, you know, the missionaries would have been like, all right, fine, cool. But if circumcision wasn't really like part of the Bible, there's a pretty arguable chance that we might have abandoned it as part of our African culture, because we actually did lose a lot of our African culture during and after colonization. So to some degree, dude was kind of right. Like, it does line up with religion, so it's very easy to, you know, sort of throw the accountability to one side or the other. But with that said, the main reason why circumcision actually exists as part of African culture is not really on its own. It's part of a process that is referred to as initiation. For those of you all that remember your GHC or social studies from like primary school days, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Initiation was part of the rites of passage that you had as a person of African culture. Whichever culture you are part of, you had some sort of rites of passage whereby, you know, you were kind of supposed to go through life. Stuff like birth, then, you know, initiation, then marriage, then death and shit like that. So initiation was there and circumcision was like the last part of it. And the reason why initiation existed is actually because you were transitioning from, for example, for us guys, or at least for the male species, you are transitioning from being a boy into a man. And that transition required training. It required you to be taught certain skills as a man so that you can be a much better man in the face, or should I say, in the image of the community. So you would go through like a bunch of classes and teachings and shit, and then you would be circumcised. Now, not all communities did circumcision. There were some communities, like for example the Luos, which I'm guessing probably George Peter Kaluma is from, who did not do circumcision, but they would do something like pulling of, I think, 6 lower teeth or some shit. And that would essentially mark the end of their initiation as, you know, like a man in the community. And I think, you know, there was still another set of classes to kind of just end that off as you are healing, so that now when you go back to the community, because normally like for that entire process, you'd probably be like segregated from a lot of the community. By the time you're going back to the community, you are to be regarded as a man. But now you look at it in today's day and age, people are just circumcising because it's a part of the process. So for a lot of people that I grew up with, they ended up getting circumcised after like class 8, for example. And for the vast chunk of them, it's not like there was any particular training or classes on initiation or like manhood training and shit like that. So essentially they were just going for the act and not necessarily the whole process of initiation. And when you kind of think about it, that's going to eat the sacrament and sip the wine that is supposed to be the body and blood of Christ and everything, without doing catechism or some form of baptismal like training and shit, like where you are taught like the doctrine of the religious belief that you're a part of and all that. And if you know religious people, whenever it comes to processes and rituals like that, like they tend to be like, nah, you have to stick to, you know, you have to follow the rules, you have to stick to the process. But when it comes to circumcision, it's like, well, you know, you're of age, let's go and have your dick chipped off. And considering that, like, some people have said that it actually does lower the sensitivity of your penis as a guy, not unless if you're saying that you're going to get circumcised for like medically related reasons, which would make your dick a little bit more hygienic because you don't have to deal with like trying to clean it, you know, with like an extra bit of like skin on top of it. You can't really say that there's much of a reason to actually circumcise guys today. Like, there is no initiation. It's basically just you go, you get a piece of your dick chopped off, and then you move on with life. And if that's the case, then maybe we should start reconsidering circumcision in and of itself. Or we bring back manhood training. I'm actually for either one of the two, because on one end, the next generation will get to enjoy sex a little bit more. And on the other end, the next generation will probably have better training on being better men for tomorrow than a lot of us did. Because in reality, most guys didn't really get that sort of training. Like, I didn't really get any training that I can really remember, to be quite honest. And for me, the only advantage that I really had was the fact that, I got circumcised a lot earlier than a lot of my classmates. So while I was in primary school, like, I could sometimes use it as like a diss whenever, like, things would get heated, because I knew that most of these guys were waiting until after class 8 so that they'd get circumcised, and I just called them either Akipi or Akehe, which is Kikuyu for uncircumcised, which is usually a diss amongst most African cultures. But with that said and done, like, I feel like nowadays circumcision has really lost its meaning, and we should probably either bring back manhood training along with it, or just take it out entirely and let people enjoy the many pleasures that can come with having an uncut dick. Although, then again, considering that there are more hygienic reasons to get circumcised, probably that should be the new consideration. But either way, I am going to leave it at that. I might be right, I might be wrong. Either way, that's up to you. But I am going to leave it and move it on to our main topic of this episode. Now, while I was on TikTok not too long ago, I stumbled across a particularly interesting video. Now, it was from the influencer known as Just Ivy Africa, or Just Ivy. And normally she does talk about finance quite a bit, and she was talking about finances in this video. But for some reason, it's like people in her comment section weren't particularly happy. Now, she was talking about living beyond your means and how that needs to change, and like, people need to learn to cut back and shit, and people weren't particularly happy. Now, I watched the clip. I didn't find anything particularly wrong with it per se, and for me to kind of explain why I agreed with what she was saying, but also add my own sort of added spin to all of this, I first need to let the clip play. So without further ado,
if your rent is costing you more than 25% of your income, you're living beyond your means. If your household expenses are costing you above 28% of your income, like over and above the rent, you're living beyond your expenses. If today, beep, beep, you get a message and your friend says, hey, let's have this impromptu vacation, let's go, and their wants influence your decisions, it means you have no budget. It means you're most likely living beyond your means. If you call your friend, now it's your turn, you're the one calling your friend and saying, Pipi, let's go for drinks, I'm getting a promotion, my boss promised, or I'm getting a pay rise, a payment is coming in 2 weeks, you're probably living beyond your means. You have no emergency fund. If today you can't work, if today your husband can't work, if today your wife can't work, your brother, and you're stuck, you're living beyond your means. If you can't pay your bills, every month when the bill conversation is brought up, it's a pain for you, you're living beyond your means. You take out loans to upgrade your lifestyle. That business class flight that you're spending $10,000 on, you've taken a loan. That party you're throwing for people to post for us on social media, you're taking a loan. You're living beyond your means. You own a house or a car you cannot afford. Again, you see the tokens running out and you cry. You can't handle the monthly shopping. Guys, you're living beyond your means. Okay? If you can't pay back your debt, you have debt, yes, but you can't pay it back on time, you're living beyond your means. So, did I describe you? Did I describe your sister, your friend? Are you living beyond your means? Who are you trying to impress? It's fine. Miss that party, miss that trip, it's fine. Make short-term investments, not sacrifices. We're investing our money, our time in the short term for long-term benefits.
Okay. So having watched this video, personally, before I even opened the comments, I was like, you know what, maybe minus the idea that there are certain variables to life that can make a lot of this budgeting a little bit harder, is there anything that I can really oppose to this, of which I didn't really find anything? And I think maybe to some degree it's because a lot of the things that she's saying are things that I also, can I say preach, but just believe in, because I don't talk that much about finances. Like, for example, one that I have mentioned on this podcast quite a bit is the fact that if you are living from paycheck to paycheck, you are living beyond your means. You are not living within your means. You're not living in your means. You are living beyond your means if you are living paycheck to paycheck. And, the whole talk of, you're one emergency fund away from like financial meltdown. I've said that also quite a bit. Like, you kind of think about it. This is like a lot of this is actually particularly true information. Now, the unfortunate reality is that there's a lot of people in the comment section who are opposing what she said, and they are like, oh, she's very out of touch with reality. Oh, do you know how much most people make? Blah, blah, blah. Like, if she took into consideration that, then she wouldn't be saying what she's saying. Of which, personally, I feel like most people were just pressed because what she was saying does not reflect the current reality. There's a lot of people, actually a vast chunk of Kenyans, are mostly just making money to get by. It's not like people are making boatloads of money and blowing through most of it on just indulgences that are, liabilities, and just having fun and like engaging in like particularly disposable behavior or something of the sort. Like, a lot of people are just making money to get by, pay school fees, put their kids through school, and so on and so forth. So saying what she was saying about, how much you're spending on like rent, how much you're spending on like food and utilities, it does kind of strike a nerve to some people because they're working to get by and they feel like they're doing comfortably okay getting by. But in reality, like, them being told, no, you're living beyond your means is almost a stab at them because you should be doing better. Or at least that's, them feeling like she's saying you guys should be doing better. And when it comes to what it is that she said, I look at it as information rather than advice or even solutions, because I feel like when people were busy watching this video, they were first losing it because of the percentage she was talking about on rent and like food and utilities and all, and also the bit about taking loans, because a lot of people actually end up losing a lot of money to loans. They end up using a lot of money paying back loans and shit, and they take a lot of loans, and you find that their rent and the cost of like food, utilities and rent and shit is a much higher percentage than what she was talking about combined. So, people of course felt pressed, but in reality, what she was giving is basics of personal financial management, which is information. And yes, she did add her opinion on like, you don't have to go to every part, you don't have to take every loan, blah, blah, blah. But essentially what she was giving was information. And a lot of people were expecting to get advice and or solutions from her. Now, all three of those things are particularly different. Information is just the data, and more often than not, it is usually very theoretical and very set to ideal circumstances. Now, of course, advice can be a little bit more tailored to reality, and it can be tailored to an individual, but essentially solutions are what is tailored to a specific individual or a specific case at that point in time, of which I think a lot of people expected that maybe whatever she's saying isn't a solution, and it pissed them off because it was a reminder of the reality not matching the information that she was giving. Now, while it might not match a lot of people's idea on like having good finances, considering that a vast chunk of Kenyans are living with and through some form of debt, it does kind of create sort of like a rule book on what good financial management should mean for the typical person. And this is sort of like personal finance information that I think a lot of people need to have almost like a rule book, especially when you're starting out, when you start making money, if you are not being plagued by things like black tax or like things like massive hospital bills that might bring you down financially, because this is information that can help a lot of people actually. And I would even want to talk a little bit more about this, and hopefully I should be able to get someone who is more of a personal finance expert so that we can have this discussion on the podcast sometime soon. But essentially, like, when you kind of think about managing your finances in a pretty good broken down way, this is a pretty good set it and forget it idea in terms of how to break down how much you should be spending on what it is that you have. Now, of course, like I said, this isn't for everyone, and it mainly works when you're making good money, or at least when you're making above survival money, such that you are living within the means of your salary, plus your salary can afford to give you a little bit more disposable income here and there, such that you can manage your finances particularly well. Or you're making well enough money that what you need to do is organize your finances such that you are saving some, you are investing some maybe, and you're not blowing money through every single month, assuming that you'll always get money, or that, as long as you can just take a loan here and there, you can pretty much do whatever it is that you want. And, with that kind of a blueprint, it is pretty good. It is pretty good. And, when you kind of look at people that complain that this is, very hard to achieve, if you're a single person, I'm gonna give you probably the biggest hack ever. And this is where me, as a guy that talks about relationships, usually likes to come in, and I'm like, you know what? One of the most financially prudent ways that you can actually grow your money pretty well is through being in a relationship and, you guys being particularly good at financial management. Now, the reality of it is that is way easier said than done, considering that there's a shit ton of people that have very poor financial education and, have close to zero financial management skills. But under ideal circumstances, kind of just like in Ivy's case, under ideal circumstances, you can actually do pretty well if you are with someone and you guys are in a relationship and you guys are actually pretty financially educated and are pretty good at financial management. And this is probably why I tell the people that are like, oh, his money, our money, my money types, to kind of fuck off, because that sort of belief system, that sort of mindset doesn't really help at this point. All right. If you are going to be in this sort of ideal that I am talking about, or if you're going to be a part of this group that I'm talking about, then both sides need to contribute into the pool such that the both of you guys are contributing probably about an equal amount, and with whatever money is left, you guys can actually do pretty well. And I'll give you a pretty good breakdown of this because I have seen something particularly similar sort of happen. Now, assuming that the both of you are making about 100k net, so the assumption is that you're probably doing about 130 to 150k salary gross, so 100k net is what you have after taxes and deductions are done. So you have that, and the both of you guys are coming to the house with 100k net. You guys could afford to be in a 2-bedroom apartment for 50k in Nairobi, which, depending on where you are in Nairobi, is actually pretty decent for most of the part, not unless you're going to the more expensive areas. And the further out of Nairobi you get, the more that you can get for that 50k a month. Hell, you could even get a house with a compound and everything. But let's just stick to 50k. You throw in bills like internet, water, electricity and shit, and slap around 10k on that, which is probably on the more expensive end, but let's just go with 10k, of which you now have 60k in household payments and shit. With 100k net on each of you, you guys basically have only 30k to contribute each if you guys are living together. That leaves you with 70 G's, which you can use to plan a bunch of other things that you would like to do. So let's assume that, for example, maybe there's about 30, actually let's even call it 40k for food and transportation, which is regular for the both of y'all. You will keep that money. That is the disposable income that you will use to feed yourselves and transport yourselves to point A and B. So essentially you throw 40k in that. Now you're left with about 30k, you put it in savings, or even assume that you put it in an account and there is no interest on it. After about a year, you will have 360,000, assuming that nothing happens and you guys have to touch some of that money. If you assume certain damages and issues that may arise, probably remove about 60k. You still have 300 G's each that you have managed to save at the end of a year. And that's if the both of you guys contribute to actually ensuring that the costs of the house that the two of you are living in aren't all that high. And mind you, the rent can go lower and the cost of things can go lower. I'm just looking at it from, financially comfortable. Let's get a 2-bedroom house, or a fairly expensive but very, very nice and luxurious 1-bedroom apartment, or even something this, that, and the other. It's basically just you and your partner that are staying together. With 300 G's, all right, you could even remove 100k for traveling throughout the year, 100k budget. And if you plan yourselves well, hell, you could do Dubai. And if you want to do more trips, you could basically split that money and use it for multiple trips throughout the year, whether it's every quarter or every third or even twice in a year. And you guys will be doing particularly well for yourselves financially. And guess what? You will still have 200k that has been saved up for that entire year, which you guys can use on a bunch of other things, because 200k isn't little money. So you kind of think about it, like if you guys are in a relationship and you are good at managing your finances, you guys can do very, very well together, even though you don't have that much money, or even though you don't make that much money. Now, of course, there's a lot of people that do not make over 100k. There's definitely way more people that make less than that. So of course you can tweak it depending on your desires and what it is that you would want between you and your partner. But if the both of you decide to contribute equally like this, you can actually make it happen. And when you think about it, staying in a relationship like this is more financially advantageous, because you think about it, if you cheat, it's more expensive, because the amount of money that you will spend trying to woo someone else or trying to bang someone else is going to be pricey. Not unless if you're an incredibly good looking person, such that the other person is probably spending money on you, regardless of gender, that is. You also think about it, being single doesn't look like it's even more financially advantageous in a situation like this, because you think about it, like, yes, maybe you might spend a little bit more on food and transportation and shit, of which, hoping that you're not with someone that is particularly extravagant. But the both of y'all, if the both of you choose to be single and stay in separate places, that's way more in rent that you guys will be paying, maybe even more in like food or even transportation, moving from point A to B to like B together. So you guys will probably end up spending more money on that. You will be spending more on, say, things like electricity bills, maybe transportation and all that. But for the most part, you think about it, like, you'll probably be spending more as a single person than someone who's in a relationship, provided that the both of you are contributing to those costs in a near 50-50 way. And the reason I'm really, really for this sort of situation and this sort of arrangement between two people is because I've actually seen something very similar to this happen with very, very good results. Like, I know these two babes, they're absolute besties, they live together, and as most babes would, they basically split the bills 50-50. They make really good money, like each of them earns very, very good money, and they can afford to live in a particularly nice apartment, and they go for trips outside of the country and even inside of the country whenever they can, and they live particularly luxurious lives. Now, considering that I do speak for guys and I am a guy, I wouldn't advocate for guys to stay together, just mostly because, the whole living with your friend thing isn't as advantageous for guys as it is for women. So that's why I advocate for guys to live with their partners and be with financially prudent partners that you guys can agree and have good financial planning skills and like management skills with. Because at the end of the day, like, yes, we can always talk about, the guy should make more money, blah blah blah, but the reality is most of y'all are dating well within your earning range. So if you're a babe that's earning 50k, expecting that you'll be dating a guy that's doing 500-600k isn't particularly likely. It is possible, but it's not particularly likely. So it's better to plan within your earnings range and maybe a couple of percentile above or below. That way, when you choose to date someone and the both of you choose to contribute financially, you guys can have a great financial future, such that not unless if one or both of you go through some particularly tough times in your lives, you guys won't really have to have that much of a problem when it comes to money. Which kind of leads me to my conclusion in all of this, which is being in a relationship might actually be the smartest financial decision you can actually make as a person. But that is very dependent on whether the person that you are with has good financial management skills and is very financially conscious. Otherwise, if you're dating someone who doesn't have good financial skills or has some fucked up financial beliefs when it comes to relationships, then I'm sorry. Fellas, you might just be suffering with that one. Although, then again, considering that I'm not a financial guru, maybe I don't understand how this is supposed to be. Maybe I don't understand relationships well enough, or women or men well enough in terms of finances to make whatever conclusions I've made. Either way, I want your thoughts on it. The DMs are open. On IG, it is at the breaktime_podcast. On Facebook, it is at the breaktime podcast. And on X, it is at Bagaka the D. And on Bluesky, it is at the breaktimepod.bsky.social. Thank you so much for listening all the way till the end, and I will catch you guys on the next break.
But what I believe is that if you put a pastor and a prostitute in one room, one is likely to convert the other.